In this video, I'm going to show you how to shallow out your downswing to get you hit more powerful, straighter shots, maybe even get you hitting some little baby draws. So as ever, today's Friday Fix is powered by Players Fuel CBD products for golfers. Now, the idea of today's video though is to help you shallow out your golf swing. Now, before we get into kind of what is steep, what is shallow, I'm going to show you a couple of the shots that you might see if you're someone that isn't potentially shallowing the club out. We might see that horrible, slicey one out to the right. Or we might see that equally destructive one over to the left. Now, if you're watching the video and going, that's me, I've got both of those shots in my locker. What you'll probably find is that maybe one of those is more common, but what makes it really difficult is you can't aim for the common one in case the other one happens. So when we look at the golf swing from down the line, what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about as somebody gets to the top of their swing, as they start down, the club moves more out in front, the shaft is much steeper, and that causes that impact to be much more of an out to in movement. And then depending what you do with that club face, if the club face is open, that'll be the slice. If you square the club face up, it'll be the pull. And heaven forbid we get the club face closed, because that'll be a pull hook. So we can really get in a lot of issues if we've got that very steep movement in our downswing. Now, what causes that steep movement? So I think most golfers are very aware, having had lessons, even comments off friends or watching YouTube videos, that on the way down, they'd like the club to drop down behind or shallow out, and then they can turn into the golf ball and the club comes from the inside. And then obviously, depending on what the club face does, the shape of shot is there. But if you were to look at all the good players in the world on the way down, that club will have gone from a steeper position to a shallower position in the downswing, which allows them to hit through. Unfortunately, with most amateur golfers, the club potentially goes from quite a shallow position on the way back to actually a quite steep position on the way down. So if I said to you, if you are somebody that swings like this and you were to watch your golf swing, it would almost be like your golf swing would create a figure of eight or a loop. So it would go under and then over and then back behind you. And I think the reason a lot of golfers do that is they're very aware of trying to get the club on the inside. So what we tend to see with most golfers is that they drag the club back on the inside, the club head goes behind very early, maybe even fans open in order to do that. And then once they're back here, almost that shoulder is fully externally rotated. So they actually can't drop the club anymore from there. So the only way to get back to the golf ball is to throw that club out and then try and manage everything else to get that strike and get that going. So if you are a golfer then who has that figure of eight movement, I want you to practice reversing that figure of eight. So we're going to feel that the club's going to work up. So we're almost going to feel that the shaft gets quite steep on the way back. And then from there, we can drop the club down. And it's much easier when the club's steep to be able to shallow. Now, you will see some of the top players in the world do this. Jim Furyk's done it incredibly successfully for getting on 30 years as a pro. Matt Wolff, one of the kind of new generation golfers, both of those players go from a very steep backswing to a shallow downswing. So let's hit a shot with that really exaggerated feeling. And let's see kind of what happens to my swing path and what happens to the shot. So we're going to go up and let the club drop on the way down. Okay, so a little pushy one. but all of a sudden we can see the club path is now 4 degrees from the inside. So then, that was a little bit of club face. So I would do a couple with that feeling, and I wouldn't worry too much where this goes in practice. So steep to shallow. That felt great. Again, my club path, 5 degrees from the inside, and I just managed the club face better there. Now I know what you're thinking if you watch my videos. Might not be a bad thing for me personally to work on. I do work on that a little bit. Now, what we did see though on the first one is the club face was still quite open. And that would be because, definitely one of my faults is that the club rotates a little bit too much on the way back. So to tie in with the figure of 8 movement, we're going to feel instead of that club face rotating that way, we're going to feel that the club face stays looking at the golf ball for longer. So we're going to feel the club face looks at the ball and we get that nice steep feeling on the way back. Then we can drop it down. The idea being, and I said at the start that we might get you drawing the ball, that if the club face is more closed to the path and we swing from the inside, there's that elusive draw that you might have been practicing or working on for years and not been able to produce. So we're going to feel the club face stays at looking at the ball a bit longer, steep to shallow. And like I said, it's either a bit of a figure of 8 or even a little bit of a loop in your swing, which I don't mind if it's repeatable. So felt good on the way back. Didn't feel I quite did it on the way down. But again, see how consistent my swing path's been. And all in all, that's a very good shot. And by no means am I going kind of full speed at this. I'd always suggest just taking a little bit of speed out, just so you're more aware of what's going on. And again, felt fantastic. And it feels really powerful as well. So we can see again, 6 degrees from the inside, 3.6 degrees closed, and suddenly getting that 7 iron out there, 178 carry, and 192 total. So what you might be just worried about a little bit is that when you're playing with golfers and you're doing this practice swing, you might get a few strange comments off golfers. Probably initially because they don't understand what you're doing, but also don't worry that even if the practice swing feels like this, chances are it will be much, much less exaggerated when you hit the shot, but certainly don't want to feel that that club's dragging round and going that way. So as long as you feel you're working on the opposite, you absolutely should get the club shallowing out and hit some really top-class shots. So hopefully guys, by the end of today's Friday Fix, powered by Players Fuel, you can see that a lot of the reasons that you struggled to get that club shallow in the downswing actually became the way you were taking the club away, and by dragging the club inside, maybe fanning that club open, made it incredibly difficult for you to then drop the club more on the inside. And if anything, you'd have to flip the hands to try and get that ball going where you wanted, but it became increasingly hard to control. And by using that kind of figure of 8 or even that slight loop to your swing, but almost like a reverse loop, we really started getting the club in much better positions on the way back, on the way down, but most importantly at impact. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, like it and share it, comment below and I'll get back to as many people as I can. There's a video just there that hopefully will help you with your game. Hopefully catch up with some of you guys down here soon. Stay in contact.